Yeah.
Awesome. Well, so Bill, I came up with this idea last December of having kind of like an anti-social distancing project because I work from home and it's very easy for me to go multiple days without talking to people. So I was thinking I'd combine sort of interests I had around space and use as a framework to get to go and talk to people and find out more about people. So I was planning to do all these interviews in person, maybe at the coffee shop or at the mall or on the street or what have you. But with the COVID-19, I've had to resort to Zoom videos with family, friends, and friends of friends.
Right.
So that's pretty much it. But can you maybe talk a little bit about yourself?
I'm a journalist. I write for Forbes right now. I haven't had a haircut in a while. But previous to this, I was at an outlet called Digital Trends. And for them, I did a lot of coverage on just technology in general, including aerospace, which has been a passion of mine since I was a kid. You know, I was the kid that wanted to be an astronaut. And so, you know, spent a lot of time, and I've always followed the workings of NASA and even, you know, Cosmos plots and the Russian efforts and so on and so forth like that. And the moon landings happened when I was 3. I don't remember them. I remember the later ones, which I thought were real exciting. But I've always followed it, and also probably about 10 years ago, kind of started following Robert Zubrin, who has a lot of ideas around getting to Mars and not going to the moon and things like that. So I think there's a lot of ideas out there about what's a good idea and maybe what's not a good idea. And so when I heard about the project that you were doing, I thought, well, that's interesting. Maybe I can weigh in with maybe some contra ideas. I think going to the moon sounds like a fantastic idea, but should we do it? Is, I guess, one of the things that I'm wondering.
Oh, well, why don't you go ahead and weigh in with those ideas?
Well, you know, I mean, a lot of it's not a lot of new ideas. Some of it's kind of like when I did a large story, a big story for Digital Trends, and it's how long ago has it been now? It's been maybe 4 years ago now, and I got to talk to several astronauts actually, which was nice, and talk to them about going back to the moon. And I talked to Zubrin at length about it, and I talked to the people at ULA, and of course, and I couldn't get through to Elon. Unfortunately, everybody tried to talk to Elon, but I wasn't able to. And because I know he's not real big on going to the moon either. He's the Mars guy, as we all know. But the question is if we're going to go to the moon, why? We've done it. It's, you know, we kind of checked it off, and we've gone, you know, 6 times, if I'm counting correctly, 11. Yes, right, 6 times. And is it worth it? It would be nice to have a moon base, but what do we need it for? And there's a lot of arguments around, well, it'd be a good jumping off point to Mars. Okay, that's an argument. It's a low gravity environment, but to operate, staff, build, and make it safe where it would work on such a scale as to be maybe a waypoint to Mars or beyond in the future, is it worth it when we are developing technologies where we can do a lot of large vehicle construction from orbit, or even larger vehicle just launch direct to flight status as well? And that was kind of Zubrin's deal, is that there are lean and mean ways to get to Mars that don't involve going anywhere near the moon, which he thought was he was kind of in the same boat, and I'm kind of stealing his ideas a little bit. It's like, we've done it, why do it again? And I understand that it is still a frontier. There's still a lot to learn. There are certainly good reasons to go. There are certainly good political reasons to go as well. If, you know, NASA and other agencies were to say tomorrow, yes, we're going to do a big moon thing, I would not be wholeheartedly opposed to it, but I would be like, is this the best use of resources? Is this the best use of money? If you're going to Mars, or even if you're looking beyond that, say Europa or Enceladus or something like that, where you have water, basically lots and lots of water, is it the best idea to go to someplace where we don't know if there's going to be water? Now, you know, the recent developments like at Shackleton Crater and things like that, where they've actually, you know, sent some technology down there and have very, very good indications that there's a large water source, possibly at both poles of the moon, definitely the South Pole. That swings it a little bit more for me. It would be worth going if we could make use of that in a economical and timely way. And there's a lot of people who have said, you know, well, the moon is, you know, all these minerals and everything like that. Okay, maybe. That's going to take an enormous amount of money to find out if that's worth even doing. Where when you look at what Elon is trying to do with Mars, is just basically get the eggs out of the basket, which is a principle I wholeheartedly agree with. I can't even tell you how much I agree with. If we can't get off this rock and spread humanity around a little bit, we're probably hosed. If we don't do ourselves in, nature has got a lot of ways to kill us. And we've had a good run so far, but I mean, even with this coronavirus thing that's happening now, it's like, you know, if the coronavirus was a 50% fatality rate, we'd be in big trouble. Really, really, really big trouble, because we have not handled this well. And in my opinion, we have not. You know, I mean, 100,000 dead just in this country alone is not handled well. And if it was something much, much more dangerous, much, much more fatal, which in the future it's probably going to be, then we need to have bastions of humanity off the planet. Certainly the moon would be a good place to go. But I think Mars is a better place because it has an atmosphere, because we know it has water, and because it has potential in a very, very long term to be a more Earth-like planet. Whether that can actually happen and take place, obviously would require a lot more science and a lot more research. But I don't think it would ever happen on the moon. In the moon, you're always going to be in an enclosure. And that would certainly be true on Mars for a long time. Whether you could build a, go, you have music? Oh, you have an
Oh
airplane.
no, I think it's a airplane. Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry. I didn't. How loud is it?
Oh, it's loud, but that's no worries. It's gone now. But anyway, getting back to Mars and the atmosphere question is, would you ever have it where you could have enough density to allow a suitless excursion onto the Martian soil? I mean, these are, again, very, very distant topics and so forth like that, but I don't think it's ever going to happen on the moon. The moon is going to be always a vacuum outpost. And could we build it into something amazing? I believe in humanity has the ability to do really technologically whatever it wants to do, if it puts its mind to it and funds it, of course. Well, we got to the moon, which was an enormous undertaking for the time, and really skipped a lot of steps that a lot of people thought we should have taken before we actually sent people there. It really leapfrogged the technology of the time. So it's very impressive that we got there, that we went repeatedly with the technology of the time. When you look back on it, it's just gobsmacking when you look at the kind of technology that's in a cell phone, even a flip phone, compared to the kind of technology that NASA was using at the time. I remember going to the Air and Space Museum in DC and just like looking at the computer cores that they hand assembled for the computers in the LEMs and everything like that. And it's just like, how did they do it? You know, it was remarkable that we went and survived in that kind of hostile environment and didn't lose people. I mean, it's insane. And it also, I think, speaks to the fact that it hasn't been done in 50 years as to how hard that was, how really difficult that was. And even with all the technological advances we have now, it's still going to be tough to get to Mars and do it right. And, you know, despite all of Musk's optimism and things like that, we have tremendous technological tools now, but I think in 20, 30 years, when we look back, if we get to Mars and do it successfully, people will be like, how did we do it? You know, it's kind of the same thing. But that's kind of my thing for the moon is it'd be great, but is it worth it? Is it needed? the way NASA wants to do it with a lunar orbiting station as a waypoint, and I'm sorry, I can't remember what the name of that is again, um, seems ludicrously complex, given the kind of lifting power that we have now, that we can assemble things in orbit and then fly them there without having to build a station that orbits the moon. I mean, that to me is just like, that just sounds like a contractor's dream, as far as money, government money. And I agree with a lot of skeptics that it's not needed. There are better ways to do it. And that's kind of where I sit right now. But again, the romantic part of me, the geeky part of me would be like, yeah, let's go and build habitats and solar plants and make it happen. But the physical part of me is why, when we could devote that to really going to someplace that is more hospitable, even though Mars is still pretty inhospitable. It just has so many advantages and so many more positives than the moon.
No, I think you make a lot of good points there. There's sort of, I mean, I look at the problem kind of from a different direction. One is, I think the reason why we stopped going to the moon was because of how costly it was, not necessarily because of how difficult it was. I mean, the contrary to that, last year the humans attempted 3 landings on the moon, only one of which was successful. The other 2 ended up in, crashing. So it is difficult from that standpoint for sure. But why has going to space been so expensive? Why is, I mean, if you look at the entire Saturn V, everything was literally thrown away and had to be rebuilt every time that they went again. So reusability and proving that out, I think, is going to be like the key. I mean, if you look at what SpaceX has done with the Falcon 9 and their ability to launch hundreds of satellites that aren't revenue generating yet, and how cheaply they're able to do that, it's definitely a game changer. And have you been following what's been going on in Boca Chica?
In where?
Boca Chica in Brownsville, Texas, where SpaceX is building the Starship.
Yes. Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's amazing stuff, and it's crazy stuff. How fast they're pushing forward, and everything like that. But reusability is the game changer. Flying to space should be like getting on an airliner. It really should. And going to the moon should be like going on a long flight. Mars may be a little bit different, obviously, because it's such a long ways away. But when you can fly to the moon in 1969 in 2.5 days, in 2029, it should be half that. I mean, when you talk about orbital mechanics, it is what it is. And when you're working with liquid powered rockets and so forth like that, there are limitations. You have fuel limits, weight limits, load limits, and so on like that. So yeah, it's still super difficult. But yeah, it kills me that next steps weren't taken. I don't know that we would have been able to do the Mars the trip in the 70s. Maybe just through sheer determination and technological stupidity, we could have pulled it off, kind of somewhat like we thought we did with the moon. I remember they had a capsule here. They toured a capsule here in Portland. This is decades ago. I think maybe the 25th anniversary of the moon landings and so forth. And I went and sat in it, and it was like, dear God, those poor guys. I mean, true pioneers and hardy fellows to sit in that thing for a week. Wow. So I think now it could be a much better experience. I think there's still, anybody that goes is going to have some kind of training. It's not like getting on an airplane now, but I think eventually it could be, and it has to just have sustained development for that to happen. And eventually, looking very, very far into the future, that's the way it's going to be to get to Mars and things like that. Have you watched this? Have you watched the series The Expanse?
Oh, I have. Yeah.
Yeah.
I even met one of the actors.
Which one?
The guy that The Canadian actor that plays the Texan Martian guy, I forget his name, actually.
Okay, I believe you. But to me, I thought that was a really, really good kind of idea, given, you know, some things, especially the propulsion technology. It's like if you could lick that, you could have this kind of future, you know. And so, you know, I can't remember. It seemed like that was in what year that was taking place, but it's certainly not going to be in my lifetime. I don't think it'd be great if it was. I'm not as young as I used to be, but maybe my son's lifetime. That'd be really nice. He watched it and was very, very impressed with it. And he's kind of a little nerdy engineer himself. And he was like, well, what about this? And what if they could do this? And what if they could do that? And so we had lots of talks about physics while watching The Expanse, which I thought was really, really good. And I hope there's a 4th season soon. But I agree, you know, reusability is going to be so key going forward. And it's great to see how successful they've been with the Falcon rockets, and hopefully with the BFG rockets, you know. We'll see.
But, you know, you mentioned, well, several things about we should go to Mars instead of the moon. You know, just looking at trying to manage the International Space Station and the fact that we have to have resupply missions almost every other month in order to keep them provisioned to handle, I mean, and if you have a trouble on the International Space Station, you have near instantaneous communication with Earth. So you could get expert help almost immediately. You always have the ability to get into one of the Soyuz capsules or now the Dragon capsules and be down on Earth within a few hours. If you're on a mission to Mars, you're not going to have those, you're not going to have that real-time support. You won't have the every 2-month resupply, and you won't have the ability to, you know, evacuate your mission and get back to Earth. So you have to be able to handle a lot wider range of contingencies all on your own with, you know, without having that real-time support. And I'm wondering if operations around the moon is a good intermediate step to sort of start proving that out.
Well, you mean use the moon as a practice field?
Oh, yeah, in the sense that, you know, you're 3 days away from Earth, so you can't just get down to Earth within a few hours. You know, the delay is a few seconds instead of being, you know, 15 minutes or so when you're on Mars. You're also out of the Earth's magnetosphere, so you're being exposed to the same deep space environment, or very similar deep space environments you would be exposed to on the way to Mars. And maybe even on the Martian surface as well, considering how thin its atmosphere is and the fact it doesn't have a magnetosphere. And so I'm wondering if, you know, it makes sense to get a lot of practice in such an environment before, you know, making sure you have the human systems in place, that you're planning ahead. You know, that's a good intermediate step.
Well, I don't disagree with you. I guess to me, the thing that comes up again is it fiscally possible to do both? You know, mounting a moon mission is still going to be extraordinarily expensive. Should that money be used to refine systems for a Mars mission? I think, yeah, the moon can be a good practice ground and so forth, but it is still far, far different than Mars, and you still have kind of the same problems. I mean, no matter what you practice on the moon, yeah, okay, you got a 2-second delay in transmission time, and you got a 3-day wait for a rescue ship. But once you get to Mars, I mean, the Mars equation doesn't change. So yeah, you could practice a lot of aspects on the moon, but you're still facing all the same problems when you're in Mars. So is that investment in that practice situation warranted? Is it a good investment? One thing, of course, you would get out of it if you did build a large infrastructure on the moon is you'd have a large infrastructure on the moon. You would have that there. So I can see that maybe if you look at it holistically and say, and I know obviously people have done this and say, here's all the money we want to spend, and this is what we want to get is this infrastructure on the moon where we can do science and we can do practice, as it were, rehearsal for Mars metrics and so forth like that. And it fits into the budget for the Mars mission. Great, I'm all for it, But if I have to choose Moon or Mars, I'm choosing Mars.
The other aspect of it is a lot of people say we've been to the moon, been there, done that. I think that was the phrase that was used by the previous administration. And, a lot of it depends upon what is your purpose in going to these places. Are we just simply have a list of tourist spots around the solar system that we just want to take some expensive selfies at? Or do we truly want to become kind of spacefaring and being able to go and utilize the resources in space wherever it's needed? And if it's that latter, we only had 6 missions to the surface of the moon on the near side in equatorial regions. Only one of those actually had a geologist that was part of the mission. The rest of them were pretty much professional astronauts who didn't have kind of like a scientific, background. And if you were to go to 6 places in, say, the Sahara Desert on Earth, that wouldn't really give you an idea on the true nature of the Earth as well. I think there's still a lot to be learned from the moon. And I was wondering what your thoughts were there.
I think anytime you decide to go exploring, whether it's back when they were exploring the Earth in pre-technological times, or I'd say pre-digital times, or the moon, it's worth going. We're an exploratory species. There's just no way around it. As you know, we've done terrible damage to the planet in those explorations, and I think we're beginning to realize that. And going forward, I think going to some of these other places, you want to go 6 places. I've mentioned Enceladus and I've mentioned Europa, maybe with a better consciousness around what it is to be a good explorer. Not that we're going to find life forms there. We might, who knows? But to be better about how we explore, because we've made our mistakes here, and so we've learned. But it's, to me, yes, it's always worth going. I think how you go is important. And I think we're given the opportunity, I think we're going to go. I mean, I would go if somebody came to me tomorrow and said, Moon mission, Mars mission, Europa mission, and the chances of you getting there are really, really good because we've got all this great technology in place, and maybe we've done it a whole bunch of times before. Would you go? Yeah, hell yes. Are you kidding? Who wouldn't? I mean, well, I guess a lot of people wouldn't, but I would, and a lot of people I know would, because I think it's human nature to push those boundaries. And when I mean human nature, I mean a very, very, very fundamental part of our human nature. I think, we had to spread out to survive. And that's just part of who we are as a species, is we go find new places to live. And if those new places are planets, moons, or whatever, I think we're going to go.
So, I mean, there's a lot of places on Earth that would be exploring too, taking a sailing trip around the world, or, going to Antarctica, or, going to like some tall mountains and what have you. I was wondering if these appealed to you equally as well as those other trips, or if going to space had a special appeal to you.
Yes, it does, because it is so different, so foreign, so fundamentally, excuse me. I'll call them back. Yes, from an early age, I knew that I like to travel. I'm a motorcycle guy, and that's how I like to get around. I like to go with the absolute bare minimum stuff I need to get to where I need. Um, I'm not in that great a shape, so I can't bicycle, but I like to long distance bicycle as well. But mostly since I've been a teenager, I've ridden places by motorcycle. So I love to explore. I looked for before we had GPS and Google Earth, I used to pore over maps like a lot of people and say, what is in that little dot right there? How can I get there and find it? And I'm also a photographer, so they went hand in hand. I would, go find these places and take photos and later video and both and so forth like that. So that's just part of who I am. So given the chance to go exploring in space, yeah, I'd go.
And you're a journalist as well. So this is kind of a good question for you. I've talked to maybe about 190 some odd people through this project. And out of them, I would say only about 30 of them knew that we were planning to go to the moon in 2024, even though, NASA's been putting a lot on social media. If you're not associated with NASA or what have you, you don't see it, even though there's been numerous news articles written about it, even though it was even in the State of the Union address. Of course, a lot of things were in the State of the Union address, so kind of missing that may not have been so bad. But I even had one person say, why is NASA keeping it a secret? And it really talks to, I think, how we consume the news differently today than we did in 1969 when we first went to the moon. That it's very easy, we could go to the moon and it would not even register as an event on a lot of people's, a lot of people wouldn't even know about it. And I was just wondering, as a journalist trying to participate in sort of that, inform a broad section of society, how does our current media platforms provide a challenge to you informing them? And what do you do to kind of overcome that?
Well, I hear what you're saying about media, and there is certainly so much fragmentation today that it is just the landscape is completely different, and it's a lot worse in a lot of ways because while the internet is a wonderful thing, it has leveled the playing field quite a bit for media, as it were. The problem is that in giving everybody basically the same megaphone, you've got a lot of really negative voices out there that have gained a lot of power. And through just the fragmentation of the media back before we had the three networks and PBS, when you had a more cohesive voice like that, there were some advantages to that. Obviously, people were, I would say, better informed. I hear what you're saying. And I talk to people now and I say, oh, did you hear about, SpaceX launching this big rocket? No. And it's just because it's just not in their sphere. And for something as big as a moon landing, when you're sending people to the moon or to Mars or something like that, I think the interest level in that is such that it can overcome a lot of those fragmentations. People who don't want to know about it are just not going to know about it. There's kind of a funny story in my family when the Apollo 11 moon landing was happening and the astronauts were about to step out on the moon. Our phone rang. And I didn't know this. My mom tells this story a bunch of times. But just as this is happening, the phone rings. And of course, back then, when the phone rang, you answered the phone. You didn't just not answer it. So the astronauts are about to step onto the moon, and my mom picks up the phone and says hello, and it's like her cousin. She's like, "Oh, I suppose you're watching that moon landing thing. It's so boring." And so now she's, pulled my mom away from this amazing, historic thing because it's just not in her sphere. It's just she has no interest. And there's always going to be those people, and there's going to be those people who say, well, it's all fake. It's all, been done by Hollywood, and, just the same things we're hearing today. But those voices are now magnified quite a bit because of the power of the internet. And so, yeah, you're going to have that. But I think most people are smart enough to understand that when rockets take off from Florida, they're not like landing in Texas at some secret location. People are going into space. I mean, you can see the space station go over at night. And I have people tell me, and I say the space station is going to come over in 10 minutes. You want to go out and see it? Oh, no, that's fake. That's not real. I'm like, I have binoculars. You can see it. And they're just like, they just won't get on board. And there's always going to be those people. Their loss, as far as I'm concerned. So I think as far as media goes and NASA's exposure and NASA's efforts to publicize the moon landings and so forth like that, and I know they're shooting for 2024. Good luck. I'm thinking more 2034, maybe. It'd be great if it was faster than that, but with the problems they've had with the SLS, the problems they've had with their capsule and everything like that, it's going to be a while. Can Musk get there first? Can China get there first? India, Japan? Who knows? We'll see. But I don't think it's going to be 2024. I think Musk has a better chance of getting to Mars in 2024 than NASA has of getting to the moon in 2024. That's kind of where I'm at. And that goes to another point in that now that you have this shift over to private space flight through SpaceX and ULA and things like that, these entities have much bigger marketing departments, marketing prowess, and things like that. I mean, we watch a SpaceX launch, especially in the early days, and it's really exciting. Cheering crowds and things like that, and these young people that are so into it and everything like that. And to me, that was just so heartwarming to see. It's so fantastic to see, but it also pointed to a different future in the commercialization of spaceflight, because people believe what they see on TV, and people believe what they see in ads. That's why they buy stuff. And if you apply those same kind of efforts, to space flight and space companies that build those kinds of things, you have a different recognition within the public that's maybe deeper and more permanent, and maybe with a higher degree of believability than what NASA is able to do. I think NASA is a great agency. I think they're wonderful. I burned I don't know how many hours on their site just looking at the coolest stuff that they do, but they don't market worth a shit. They just don't. It's like, God, I could run their whole Twitter thing and triple them, but I'm sure I'm not the only person saying that. But you look at SpaceX, and it's I think really once they get going, and they're going to get going, that it's going to be a much bigger presence in people's lives technologically than NASA has ever been, and outside of the moon landing era. It's just going to be very, very, very different. It's going to be a commercialization in every single way of spaceflight, and that includes marketing, and that's going to be very, very different from what NASA does and has done.
And now, regarding the Starship, I was wondering, did you have any thoughts on when we might actually see the first flights of it? The BFR that.
My gut tells me I would say between 5 and 7. Musk and the SpaceX team, I think, have really done great stuff. I think, it was really the launch of the car back on the first launch of the Heavy was pretty ballsy move, and he came in for some criticism for that, but it's like, what, that's the kind of marketing, that kind of stuff that this needs is some fun, maybe a little bit grandiose gestures. Now, if it had gone all terribly wrong, of course we wouldn't be saying that, but it all went completely right, and now there's this car that's going to be circling the solar system until the end of time. And it's been my experience. I mean, it took him 4 launches to get one up there, and then it took a few more to get the landing thing correct, and then the Heavy went up in one shot and worked. He's got a pretty good track record. I mean, NASA blew up a lot of rockets before they got anything into orbit too. So I think they're past baby steps, and while every launch is a challenge, and developing something like the Starship is a very big challenge. I think it can be done, and I think at the pace that they're working, God forbid we have another pandemic. Um, to me, it feels like 5 to 7, 5 to 10. If it's closer to 5, great. But it's, again, this is a huge, huge project with a lot of complexity, and I think maybe closer to 10.
Now, if they have a successful orbital launch and landing in the next 12 months, how would that cause you to recalibrate sort of your expectations?
Oh, a lot. Sure. If they can do it in the next year, yeah, sure. I would say then, much closer to 5. Godspeed. Hope they can do it. They're certainly pushing hard, but again, this is to put really big, heavy things up is difficult, especially with the volatiles involved. It's like, man, you get any of that wrong, and it's just a fireball. But they've got a pretty good handle on it, on the engine build and on the technology required to land the rockets and everything like that. So can they do it? I mean, seeing how they've gotten the crew up to the shuttle now, and I think that's just going to be the bus from now on. That's great. That's going to be really go a long way towards helping them develop that technology to get the other stuff up there. So in the next 12 months, if they can do it, sweet. I'm all for it. I would definitely revise the timeline down to 5 or less.
Now, you mentioned you thought Mars is good as the backup to Earth. It could be eventually maybe habitable by just going outside. You talked about exploration. Do you think these are enough reasons to convince enough people that it's worthwhile, or do you think there's something more out there in terms of benefits or reasons we should be exploring space?
Do I think we should be exploring space? Is that what the
exploring, or I mean, like, if you were to try to convince your fellow citizen that this is a worthy endeavor of going to Mars or going to the moons of Saturn and Jupiter, how would you go about convincing them that it was worthwhile?
Well, the eggs out of the basket thing is, to me, is as cliche as it is. That's the main argument. Is like, we have to get out of this place, to quote the song. We got to get out of this place. I think, seeing as all the environmental damage we've done so far, and we don't know how bad the global change is going to be. It could be horrific. It could not be. Who knows? One large space rock, and God, we're just screwed. And while we're doing a really good job of tracking near Earth orbit objects, near Earth objects, the Russian one that came through in 2013, they didn't know that was coming. And had that been 10 times the size, it was still, and got to ground, that would have been horrific. As it was the size of a school bus, and it still injured 1,500 people. So, nature can end us quickly. And if we don't get people out to, living elsewhere where they've got a chance to survive, some either our own stupidity or a large natural event, whether it be a space rock or a super volcano or anything like that, we just don't have it. We don't, our chances of survival into the future are slim. But I think if we do become a spacefaring society, that ticks it up quite a bit. Not to say that it's easy, not to say that it's, the safest thing to do, but it's definitely an option. And when you look around and you see that, well, there aren't UFOs landing and people getting out of those anywhere that we know of, at least, who knows what's actually happening. I think it's a difficult it's a difficult hurdle to cross as far as space flight. And, we've got the, lots of good targets within our own solar system, obviously, with all the moons and some of the planets. But realistically, we need to find a way to go beyond that. Obviously, we need to do interstellar travel. And we're talking about, stars that are 4 light years away out at Proxima. And again, this is very, very far future stuff. And you just have to keep pushing that. It can be done, I think. You know, you talk about generational shifts or things like that, whether we're ever going to develop light speed technology, I don't know. Yeah, it seems that that's, who knows? But, you know, I mean, people didn't think you could break the speed of sound forever. And I know it's, you know, it's a fundamentally different thing, but again, it's like you don't know that you can do it until you can do it. And the way, you know, research into quantum physics and building quantum computers that may be able to answer some of these questions and things like that, we don't know what the next big breakthrough is going to be. You know, there could be some kind of interdimensional travel technology. Is as far-fetched as that sounds, that's completely workable. We don't know that, and people are obviously working on that. That'd be great. But that goes back to our exploring gene, and it's just like, you know, that's an itch that we just never can seem to scratch all the way through and stay put. It's like we got to go, 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 and I think that's the main thing. The main thing I would tell people is do we stay here and take our chances, or do we go out and improve our chances? And I think most people would be like, yeah, it's probably a good idea to go out and improve our chances, and along the way maybe make some key discoveries, and along the way have some fun, you know. So those are, you know, discovery, self-preservation, and just the active exploring, I think, are three good ways to sell space exploration.
Yeah, it's amazing to think about where we would be if we haven't discovered electromagnetism, which was only discovered, you know, a few hundred years ago. I mean, you wouldn't be able to have wireless communication, cell phones, anything.
Oh, I think we're very, very much in a technological infancy right now. You know, I mean, electricity is like 300 years old. I mean, it's nothing. It's, you know, it's not that many generations of humans old, considering how long we've been around walking the planet, you know. So, you know, the next 50 years, the next 100 years could be massive, enormous advances. And, you know, far beyond our lifetimes, you know, the next 200 to 500 years, I think there's just so much stuff that we don't know. So many things that are maybe right in front of us that we just don't know about. And it's going to take continued pushes on mathematics, in science, in research, in technology to discover those things. And I think once, you know, big breakthroughs happen, that's going to help us get out there. But yeah, I think technologically we are very, very at the very, very opening stages right now. I drive a lot of electric cars for my job, electric motorcycles and things like that. And people come up to me and they're like, you know, why would you drive this? You know, it's just, you can't go very far. It takes forever to recharge. And it's like, you have to understand, this is like year 10 of the electric vehicle revolution. It is so early. It is so, so early. And the vehicles are already so, so good that the only thing that's really holding them back is battery capacity. It's just like 20 years from now, nobody's going to want to drive a fuel powered vehicle. They're going to be so inferior. And a lot of with Tesla, and I drove my first Tesla back in 2013. It's just like you drive that and it's just like gobsmackingly good. It's just like, and it's a lot of Tesla drivers say it's like, once you go electric, you never go back, and you can understand why. It's just so superior. And that's just how technology is. You can have these long runs of technology of internal combustion, you know, which came from, you know, which is a byproduct of steam engines and so forth like that. But then you have a huge paradigm shift, you know, back to electrical motivation, because electric cars were there at the start, but because the battery technology then was so limited, they just were overcome by the convenience of the gas-powered vehicle. But that's now starting to change, you know, and that's going to change a lot. And pretty soon, you know, for, you know, those gas-powered Lamborghinis, they're going to be museum pieces, because they're going to be slow and ill handling and unworkable in a future that drives on electricity. And that's just kind of the way technology works.
Yeah, indeed. And, you know, I think Elon's also big on saying that technology only improves if people try to make it improve. In fact, if they don't, sometimes you could take steps backwards.
Oh, sure. But I think it's the nature of technology to almost compete with itself. You know, I can make a better TV than you can. I can make a better car than you can. I can make a better anything than you can technology wise. And it's just the three rules always apply. It gets better, it gets better as it gets cheaper, as it gets easier to make. It's just, we've seen it over and over again with computers, with cell phones, with everything, you know. And it's going to be the same way with cars. It's going to be the same way with airplanes eventually. And I don't know if we're ever going to have an electromechanical type of propulsion system for space flight. Certainly ion drives or something. Again, R&D is where that's at, you know, and people are working on that because it's really, really problematic to haul around fuel. Really, really problematic to haul around all that fuel. And if you can convert sunlight to a propulsion, you know, outside of a solar sail or something like that, fantastic.
That's pretty exciting times. Well,
It is.
Bill, I really appreciate your time talking to me. Is there any like a rock we didn't on any subject we didn't cover that you'd like to add to it?
I don't know, man. You know, we've talked a lot about a lot of things. Is there anything that that's on your list that we haven't covered? I'm trying to think.
Well, you know, a lot of people do talk about why are we spending this money to go into space, but we have all these pressing problems on Earth. What's sort of your response to that?
My response to that is that's what everybody's been saying since they ever launched a rocket into space. Why are we spending all this money on space when we have all these problems on Earth? Because the problems on Earth don't seem to be going away. That's one. It's like, you know what? If we throw in all this money we're putting in the space program and the problems on Earth, there's still going to be problems. So let's use this money to do space exploration. Let's use this money to push the technology forward. And we have harvested so many technologies from space exploration that I've lost count, you know, of all the things that we now enjoy thanks to the efforts of research and development into space flight. It's just such a long list. So that to me is like, that's one big reason right there is we just get so many benefits from trying to figure out this thing of traveling through this vacuum, is how to do it better, what materials work better, what procedures work better, how can we make people do it better. It's just like all that stuff. Talking about trickle down, it's like a freaking rainstorm, you know. And so to me, that's worth the investment right there. And then also just the inspiration it engenders in young people. Like I said, I was the kid that watched TV with my eyes like this, like going to the moon, you know, I want to be an astronaut. Now I couldn't be one. I caught a softball with my left eye when I was a kid. I actually wear glasses. I just don't have them on right now. And so I wanted to be a pilot. I wanted to be a fighter pilot. I wanted to enter the astronaut corps. I wanted to be an astronaut. Couldn't do it just because my vision was just destroyed. And you know, that's the way it goes. But you know, outside of that, you know, you talk to so many. When I would talk to astronauts, like especially the ones that went up in the shuttle when I was working on my piece for Digital Trends, and they were like, "Oh yeah, I was inspired because you know I saw the space missions when I was a kid," and that's just so inspiring. My kid loves to watch, you know, launches and everything like that. We really enjoy it. It inspires people. That's like worth it right there, let alone all the other things, because the Earth problems are going to get solved. Maybe, you know, we're all going to have to work at those, but to deny this branch of exploration because we can't fix something on Earth, I think is short-sighted and stupid. So yes, it's more important that we continue to do space exploration, and I wish they fund it more. You know, I know the Trump administration has said that there will be larger funding for NASA, and that's one of the very, very few things I've agreed with this administration, maybe the only thing. But I would love to see more funding from our country for our space program. That would be fantastic, because it inspires people and because the benefits that we get from it are enormous. So those are my reasons. I would say keep spending the money.
Well, the inspiration, you know, that would only work if people know about it. And kind of back to the way people consume news and the fact that it really could kind of be below people's radar. How do you get the word out to a broader set of people so that they know about it and can be inspired by it?
You know, really, in this age of in this economy of attention, which is what we are in now, rather than it's really an economy of attention rather than money. Money is kind of a subset of the attention. You got to do stuff. You have to get their attention by doing things, by flying people up to the space station. I know a lot of people, when I was watching the live stream of that, it was millions of people were watching that. It was fantastic. But that's what you got to do. You got to do cool stuff. And maybe not even cool stuff. You just got to do stuff. You just got to go out there and get it done. And that's, I think, is the main thing. You can market it all you want. I mean, how much money did Microsoft pour into the Zoom? And that was whatever, like a lead balloon. You never know. Certainly NASA could take some lessons from bigger companies on how to market, and maybe get some of those people in there. But as a government agency, I know that's not where people want to go. So, we'll see. But I think basically, flying people to the moon, flying people to Mars, flying people to the ISS, doing cool stuff. That's for space travel. That's your marketing. You have to do stuff and keep people interested.
Well, that sounds good. And I think a lot more people knew about DM2 than knew about our plans to go to 2024 because it actually happened.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So, well, thank you so much, Bill. I really appreciate your time. And, thanks for getting the word out there about our endeavors in space.
You bet. Thanks a lot, Nathan.
Okay. Well, you have a good rest of your day.
All right. You take care.